So this past week, I think what's really interesting is like Xi Jinping gave this big speech where he's usually pretty measured about how he talks about the U.S., but this time he was very much the U.S. is the problem, using Cold War rhetoric like, the U.S.'s containment of China. That was followed up by the new foreign minister, Qin Gang, also talking about, conflict and confrontation being inevitable unless Washington backs off. Is this change in rhetoric significant, do you think?
No, not really. I think that the Chinese have been using this alarmist rhetoric for some time, and it fits perfectly with their efforts to try and manipulate the Biden administration's China policy. And what they've done is basically the Biden administration has announced publicly that rather than having a policy of peace through strength, they have what I call a war avoidance strategy. And that means that the Chinese are manipulating the policy by making alarmist comments. Qin Gang, for instance, Xi Jinping just recently said issued a new phrase that included the willingness to fight or to struggle. So I think that this is all part of a plan to get more concessions out of the Biden administration. If you recall, early on, I think it was in 2021, Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman went to China. And during that time, she was presented a list of demands from China. And it was kind of outrageous that they would do that. But the list of demands was that if the United States wants better relations with China, it has to totally revamp the Trump-era policy, which really was revolutionary in terms of rejecting the 40-year-old engagement policy that was really an utter failure in trying to force China to change its behavior and become a more normal, non-communist or non-threatening power.
When you say that the Biden administration has announced a war avoidance policy, like what have they done that makes you say that?
Well, the Trump administration, through the Secretary of State Pompeo and his staff, initiated a number of really important changes, which was, as Miles Yu, Pompeo's top China aide, said, it was the U.S. had an anger management policy towards China. Don't do anything to make the dragon angry. Biden came in and announced that, well, we're going to compete with China, but we're also going to cooperate. So the Biden administration looks at its competition as some kind of geopolitical Olympics, which, contrary to the Chinese, they've made very clear there isn't going to be no cooperation with the United States unless the United States changes its policy and basically goes back to the appeasement-oriented policy. So there's that. And by the way, the Chinese have been waging what they call three warfares: legal warfare, opinion warfare, and media warfare. So they don't talk about it in terms of competition. They're engaged in this gray zone, non-kinetic warfare against the United States.
Well, I'm curious about the idea that you say that the Biden administration has changed policy to appease China, because one of the things Qin Gang talked about as a red line was the Taiwan issue. He was kind of vague about what specifically that meant. But I know, for instance, recently it came out that the Biden administration has quadrupled the number of U.S. troops in Taiwan. So, I mean, that seems like it's not a move that would make the Chinese Communist Party happy.
Yeah, I think Taiwan is one area where the administration has not gone full neo-appeasement, as I would say. On the other hand, there is a debate within the Biden administration between the more leftist, radical policy people, and I would put John Kerry and the climate czar in that category, and the more centrist Democrats who kind of understand what I call the China threat. And I've seen this creeping change that they want this cooperation, especially on issues like climate change, and which, of course, has been a huge red herring in terms of the Chinese approach to it. I think China announced that, we'll come into compliance with lower emission standards in 2060, when all Chinese current leaders will have no longer be on the scene. And this fits with a Chinese negotiating strategy. The Chinese, when they make an agreement, the Chinese communists, that is, when they make an agreement, that agreement is only valid for the specific time that it's made. And you've seen this in almost every agreement that China has made with the West or the United States. They violated it. And the reason they violated it is because they feel that it's only valid at the time it's made. When conditions change, they say, then they're no longer bound by these agreements, whether it's on conducting cyber attacks or having better coordination of military activities in the South China Sea and neighboring waters.
I mean, I think that was most clear with the Sino-British treaty for Hong Kong, that, they basically said that meant nothing as soon as the handover happened.
Yeah.
But so do you think with this more aggressive rhetoric, I mean, wolf warrior diplomacy isn't anything new, but do you think that will make, people in America more aware, perhaps some of those people in the Biden administration that are more of an appeasement camp, as you say?
Like I said, that there's still an ongoing debate. And, I think the recent spy balloon incident was kind of a galvanizing event for a lot of Americans who understood the threat from China. But here they sent a balloon over, then they lied about it. They have since recovered. The balloon was shot down off the Carolina coast. They've since recovered the details and the mechanics of that. And why haven't they released that to show that China's lies about it being a civilian weather balloon and a non-threatening entity? They haven't released that. And it's clear that they've declared it a spy balloon, but at the same time, they also shot down a couple of model balloons and undermined their whole case for countering Chinese high-altitude surveillance. So I think the administration needs to make public what they know about the surveillance balloon. And part of the problem is they invited the FBI in to conduct the investigation, which is very unusual, because normally on those kind of foreign intelligence things, the Pentagon would be in charge of what they call foreign exploitation. But once you put the FBI in charge, they have the least transparency of any agency of government. They're notorious for not sharing and withholding information from the public about what they know of foreign activities.
Why do you think that decision was made?
I think it was part of a policy to not upset the Chinese. Again, it reflects what I'm calling this neo-appeasement approach. And there's further evidence of that too, like the administration's explanation for why they didn't immediately shoot down the balloon when it was over Alaska or remote areas of Montana. They claimed that they were concerned about civilians on the ground. I don't buy that at all. It was clear that Anthony Blinken was on his way to Beijing, again, as part of this new détente, which began back in November when Biden met Xi Jinping in Bali, Indonesia. And so that they were trying to protect Blinken's trip. And as soon as the event became public, not through the government, through an enterprising photojournalist in Billings, Montana, who photographed the thing, and they could no longer sustain this idea that they were going to keep this secret while this balloon was flying over our missile fields and missile defense sites. In fact, there was even a case. Senator Sullivan recently said that the Northern Command sought permission to shoot down the balloon when it was over Alaska, and somehow they were denied doing it. Now, the Pentagon has denied that, but I think that's still out there, and it needs further investigation and public explanation for it.